What's up, guys, and welcome back to another episode of Harrison's Garage. Today we are going to be getting started on a very cool project. It's been a long time coming. I've really just spent a lot of time trying to figure out which, compressor I wanted to get, how I wanted to wire it up, where I wanted to connect it, what I was going to be connecting it to, which over here, these are airbags. So I'm gonna flip you guys around, show you what we ended up buying, and just kind of walk you through how the rest of this video is gonna go. All right, as you can see, we've got the ARB air compressor. I ended up getting the CKMA12, which is the single, and the ARB Pressure Control Module. I'm going to be using this compressor to inflate these airbags, controlling it with this pressure control module through my phone. That's at least how I wanted it to work anyway. So usually this compressor from ARB is used to inflate front and rear air lockers for a Jeep, and usually this is used to control the pressure going into a tire. So what I wanted to do first was just kind of troubleshoot a little bit. I've got the harness out. I had everything connected to my truck, just trying to get my head around how the existing wiring harness works and operates, and then that way I'll be able to sort of design my own, which I have done, and I'll show you in a sec what that's going to look like. Because I don't have front and rear air lockers, I don't plan on using this switch at all. I'm going to be using the auxiliary switches in the truck. If you haven't already seen that video, I highly recommend going to check it out. I will recommend, if you don't have the aux switches from the factory installed, go look at it. If that interests you, go ahead and put them in. They're amazing, great upgrade. Probably the favorite thing I've done to the truck so far. So I'm gonna have my single aux switch control the power to the compressor, the pressure control module power, and this sort of actuator solenoid power as well. So I'll just kind of walk you through this setup. This is obviously the compressor. This is the air line going into this. What I have here and here are adapters. This is a 1/8 BSPT fitting. This hose has a 1/4, I believe, NPT fitting. So this hose going into the 1/4, this going into the 1/8. So I've got Teflon tape on here because I wanted to do a couple of experiments in how this would all work. Really, I wanted to know if this pressure control module would maintain pressure even if power to the compressor was turned off. Essentially, if it did, which it does, if it did, I wasn't going to need to have a valve somewhere in line going from here out to the airbags. Because it maintains pressure when the compressor is off, my airbags won't deflate. At least that is the assumption so far, given that it maintained pressure when I turned it off, when I had everything hooked up earlier. This output I'm going to have wired up with a steel air hose like this one, but it's going to be about 10 feet long going to the bumper. I'm going to have an air chuck on the bumper just for inflating tires. Essentially, if I wanted to inflate a tire and didn't want the air going, from the compressor to the airbags, that's fine. Pressure control module will remain off. I can inflate a tire to whatever PSI, say 30 to 60, while having my airbags still at 50 or 20 or 5, whatever, because this will be off. And the air in that line will be sort of separate from this line system. Now, backing up a little bit, I've got this sheet of 11 gauge steel, sheet steel. I ordered it as a plate. I think it was 3 inches this way. I can't remember what this length is. I think it was maybe 18. I might recommend going a little longer than this, just because you've got this relay that you're going to have to incorporate and this guy that you're going to have to tie off somewhere. But what I ended up doing was going 11 gauge for the strength. I'll show you, I'll throw it up in the corner there, a photo of what it looks like mounted on the truck. I've already test fit it. It fits nicely. The compressor is going to mount here, And obviously I've got 4 bolts, probably overkill. I kind of want it to be. I don't want this to vibrate loose. This plate, this golden one, came with the compressor. I'm going to use it as just an extra backing, kind of line things up, help me line things up, as well as just hopefully increase stiffness. So what I'm going to do next, drill this guy out, because I've pretty much determined this is where I want it to be. So I'm going to drill these holes on the drill press, and start with a pilot hole, and then go with the size that you eventually need. Something like this size straight away will likely wander a little bit and walk. First step will be to drill out the plate and then move on to fabricating our own wiring harness. Okay, I've got the compressor set aside. The bracket now clamped to the drill press set so it's got maximum torque. When drilling steel or anything, it helps to punch out the holes you're going into. Hit it with a little WD-40. So I'll set you up on time lapse and get going on this stuff. Okay, I got the holes drilled. If anybody is looking for a way to remove Sharpie from metal, WD-40, by the way, is kind of a random tip. What I'm going to do is mock up the compressor on here on the plate with all the hardware. See how everything fits. I'm going to see where the pressure control module will want to go, finalize that location, and then drill that out. I've got the compressor sort of mocked up on here. Went out and got some rubber washers. Alright, so this has 2 bolts in it now. I'm going to sort of just draw out where I want this pressure control module to mount on the bracket that it comes with, and then start drilling that out, and I'll probably come back with you once I've got those holes drilled out. Okay, it is the next day. I've drilled the holes out, mounted the pressure control module here. You'll see I've got a gap. I've put rubber washers to isolate the pressure control module, hopefully to keep that from vibrating so much when this turns on. Now, I was thinking about how to make my life a little easier. It's quite difficult to mount this whole assembly here up and under the truck. Just there's not a lot of area to reach and maneuver. I'll be able to buzz these on with the impact without really getting behind here, because I can't really reach behind here the way it's mounted. So I can buzz those on with the impact there. But this is going to be really hard to reach, and the setup here for this guy. So the setup with these carriage bolts, they slide forward and backwards, and if they were sliding while I'm trying to hold this really heavy compressor, if they're sliding back and forth and I'm trying to get all 4 of them to line up with these holes, that'd be a very difficult task, and I'd probably more than once drop this thing, hopefully not on my head, but I kind of feel like I would. What I decided to do was secure the carriage bolts in place using the plate that comes with the kit. Got rubber washers there, and then the plate, and then these sort of half bolts, they are not quite as thick as a normal, bolt, half thickness nuts. This is a nylock nut, sort of for scale. That's a typical nylock nut. It's got a nylon lock ring on the end. These are thinner. Really the purpose of these is simply to hold the plate tight and in place. So, and it also keeps the carriage bolts from sliding in that groove. And then I won't have to worry about aligning these. All I have to do is just take the compressor and drop it in once it's lined up, and then put on at least 1 nut on the other end of this. Thread those on and keep it from just falling back towards me out of this thing when I'm hanging it up, and then I can tighten it down with a little bit more patience. So I'll go ahead and just drop this in here and show you what that looks like. Okay, thought I'd catch you up now. Basically what I did was drill another hole here for this relay. That's got another bolt, inch and a whatever by 20 thread pitch, and a rubber washer inserted in there. And all three of these nuts underneath, these black ones, I'm going to be replacing with nylock nuts. I just didn't want to spend the time to thread them all the way up, given that resistance, when I just had these to spin them on there for sort of fitting purposes. I am going to be cutting these bolts down to size and then putting the nylock nuts on there for final fitment, but this is good enough just to see what the general layout looks like. It will sit like this in the truck, or under the truck rather, just to give you a sense of orientation. So what I'm going to do now, I also stuck this wiring harness into here. I am going to keep the harness that came with the PCM. I've added my own electrical tape on the ends of this just to cover these up, because none of these were covered from the factory harness. It stopped here. These two leads go to these solenoids here. So this purple wire will go, this purple wire will go to this solenoid, and this I guess orange and black wire will go to the back solenoid there. So those are going to be kept. I'm going to be running through next, grabbing the wiring diagram I put together and sort of making my own wiring harness using the existing connector, and put together a loom that's a little bit more suitable for the truck over there, which is quite a bit longer than what you would find on a Jeep. Okay guys, back out here again next day. What we're going to be doing is running our own hotline from the power distribution console. We don't need to worry about ground over here. From there, it's been grounded when we installed the aux switches, so hotline coming from there. We're running it back. This, by the way, is just kind of the general shape of the truck. So this is where the driver's seat is. We're running the hotline down along and underneath the passenger side. We're going to have a relay, and that relay is just the relay that came with this guy. Bolted that onto this mount yesterday. Hotline is going into the 30 and then coming out the 87, running straight to the compressor. The 85 and 86, 85 is ground, 86 is signal. It's going straight to this pressure switch. So what will happen is this will be turned on in the cab, send power, compressor will turn on here, and this red wire here will run down, activate the PCM, and activate the compressor signal switch. Once this hits 100 psi, it will trip the relay, cutting power to compressor, but because we've run power from the PCM before the relay to the hot wire, the pressure control module will remain on even in the compressor is not, which is exactly what we want. So we're running ground, signal ground here, sort of a smaller gauge ground, to the main compressor ground, and then tying them all together and running to chassis. So that's the wiring diagram. I'll let you pause that there for a second if you need to. But what I'm going to do is going to continue ahead, taking the tape off, pulling this wire out of here, cutting it to size, and just kind of putting this together, and I'll meet you back when I'm done with that. Okay guys, we are back. This is the new and improved wiring harness. It's a much smaller deal than what we had before. This is the PCM on the back of the bracket. I've just zip tied it in place for now. Everything on the bracket sort of semi-permanently in place. It's just kind of fixed fairly tight, but not sealed. There's no thread locker. These are not the nylock nuts. Anyway, this is just kind of like a test of concept, proof that it all works how I want it to, where it's mounted. So here is the new wiring harness. I've got one ground wire, one hot wire. At some point here, I think, I've split the hot going to the compressor relay, and this is going to the signal wires. One is this pressure switch, and one is the power for the PCM. We've got main power coming in here. We've got this tiny red wire there. I think it kind of comes up this way and over here and then that way. So I had one T-tap in that bundle of tape, which is right here. Everything else was just kind of butt connected together and then heat shrinked. So this really, for me, was the better way to go. Just kind of redo everything. The wiring harness that came with this had a lot of stuff that I didn't need, and it wasn't, I think, in my opinion, very well wrapped. It was just one layer of electrical tape. So I've left this open because that's where I fused my signal wire to this guy and this guy. This is just a 1 amp fuse in here, 1 amp inline twist fuse. Let's see, so here's the bracket. You can kind of see the PCM, trifecta of wires coming together as one bundle, running back to the PCM there. And then the other wires that don't go to the PCM, we got this line here, and this line is power. So right now, I've just got ground stuck up here to chassis ground. Obviously, that's not going to be the case. This is going to be grounded somewhere under the truck, behind the bed, behind the cab, under the bed. And this is going to be run, obviously, down the engine, down the truck, straight back to where the compressor will be. But just for this purpose, what I wanted to do was test everything to make sure that all of the changes I made to this wiring harness, as I've got it over here, I wanted to make sure all of these changes worked. I wanted to make sure the system still worked, make sure that the way I understood the harness when it came from the factory was correct, and if it was, this will have worked. So what we're gonna do is take a look at the first ignition, turn the aux switch on. Whoop. You heard that, it was the compressor. So I've got the ARB Pressure Control Module. This is my phone normally when I film with, so you'll see it's on pressure off. If we switch this to pressure control, nothing happens because target 0 and we're currently at 0. And the air outlet is unplugged, so if I hit this to 1, it's just going to keep blowing air out. So let's go ahead and do that, hit OK. It senses that there's nothing there, so we're going to set this back to 0. So the PCM is obviously doing that on purpose. I'm going to go ahead and put this plug back in so it's not, just leaking air. Okay, so then I'm going to take this up to 30. And it's going to hit it real fast because there's nowhere for the air to go here, so. See, it's already jumped up to 80. Because there's no volume, it's not able to effectively control this, but the system is working as intended, hooked up to the correct thing up there. So that's the PCM, that's the compressor, and good news is everything looks to be working properly in terms of how I've set up the wiring harness. By the way, this is just 10 gauge that I got by the foot at Home Depot at 64 cents a foot, so great spot for it. All right, I've just unhooked this guy from the truck after our initial test. Brought it over here, undid this little plug, and heard a nice pleasing little spurt of air come out of here, which means everything in this system up to this point is airtight. So all of these fittings are good, and these aren't even the final install of the fittings. I plan to use thread locker in addition to Teflon tape when I get this all fitted up under the truck there behind the cab, under the bed. So that was really pleasing to see. Anyway, so this is going to be, the final setup of all the wiring. I think under the truck, this will just tuck up nicely. I'll probably zip tie it to something along the way, and then run all of the power cabling in a bit of flexible tubing like that. So next time we are going to get the air hose connected, the compressor mounted, everything sort of ready for final position. This will all be sealed off, powerably run to the engine bay properly. So really just kind of finishing things off, getting things ready for the airbag install, the Firestone ride right. So if you enjoyed part 1, like the video, subscribe to the channel, turn notifications on, and as always, stay tuned for more.